Hey, what's up you guys, Michaela here. Today I'm back with a new video. So, as you can see by the title, I am talking about the one, the only Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, everybody swears up and down that it's haunted, but I have found nothing. Obviously, I found the Ghost Adventures episodes and all of that, like the shows the building was on. But other than that, and this one single story that was told by an old guard, I don't know if he's still the guard. Like, I've found no stories, no visitors talking about it. I found news articles, but they only mention it for a second, like, is it haunted? I don't know. So we're going to kind of talk about that, but I just want to give you guys a brief history. So Eastern State was actually the world's first true penitentiary. It was designed to inspire penitence or true regret in prisoners. So basically, prisoners were sent here to kind of be by themselves and realize what they did was wrong and hopefully become a changed person. Now, some of the notable inmates that you may know of were obviously Al Capone, which we'll talk about him, and then another guy named Slick Willie Sutton, and we'll talk about him as well, and then we'll be talking about another inmate later on too. So Eastern State was approved to be built in 1821, and it began construction in 1822, and it was originally meant to hold 250 inmates. On October 25th, 1829, Eastern State Penitentiary officially opened its doors as a part of a controversial movement to, like I was saying, to kind of change the attitude and behavior of inmates. And according to the Eastern State website, it was through confinement and solitude with labor. It quickly became one of the most expensive penitentiaries, and was one of the most copied buildings in the United States, which basically means there were other places that were designing their buildings to look like Eastern State. And it's actually pretty cool because there was an article that I found that was kind of talking about the history, and it had the actual note from the very first prisoner, and so I'm gonna read that. Charles Williams, prisoner number 1, burglar, light black skin, 5 feet 7 inches tall, foot 11 inches, scar on nose, scar on thigh, broad mouth, black eyes, farmer by trade, can read. Theft included one $20 watch, one $3 gold seal, one a gold key. Sentenced to 2 years confinement with labor, received by Samuel R. Wood, first warden, Eastern State Penitentiary. Like, that's just word for word, very laid out, straight to the point. And they actually did allow women prisoners for a very short time. And the very first female prisoner was received in 1831. In 1832, the very first escape attempt happened, and it was actually an inmate who served as the warden's waiter. He lowered himself from the roof of the very front building, and he was captured, but then in 1837 he escaped again, and I didn't really hear anything else about that, whether he got out again or he was captured again, I don't know. So Eastern State actually closed its doors in January of 1970. Most of the inmates were transferred to the State Correctional Institution at Greater Ford. Even though its walls and paint were in perfect condition, the electrical and mechanical systems were in terrible shape. So that's most of the reason why they closed down. So now we're going to get into some of the notable inmates that I was talking about earlier. Obviously, the most popular one is Al Capone, or his real name, Alphonse Scarface Capone. In 1929, he was received as a prisoner to Eastern State. He occupied one of the cells for about 8 months after being arrested for carrying a concealed and deadly weapon. And he kind of lived in luxury. It was reported that his cell was furnished with large oriental rugs, oil paintings, even a cabinet radio. So he was living pretty nice for the 8 months that he was at Eastern State. And now you can actually take tours at Eastern State, and they have his actual cell staged to replicate what it may have looked like during his stay. The next inmate is Victor Babe Andrioli. He was convicted after murdering a Pennsylvania state trooper in 1937. He was sentenced to life for first-degree murder, and he apparently escaped in 1943 by hiding in a delivery truck that was actually about to leave Eastern State. And he was finally caught by the police several weeks later at a diner in Chester, Pennsylvania, and he was shot and killed on the scene. And the third and final inmate that we are going to talk about is William Francis Slick Willie Sutton. He spent 11 years at Eastern State, and in 1945, along with 11 other inmates, he escaped through a tunnel dug by one of the other inmates that was almost 100 feet underground. He was captured only minutes after escaping. He didn't last that long in the free world. He was credited with over 50 bank robberies, 3 successful escapes from prison, and over 30 years served behind bars. And in 1980, he eventually passed away. Now we're gonna kind of get into the more haunted side of things. Like I said, I didn't really see a lot other than the shows that it has been featured on. And speaking of, it has been featured on Ghost Adventures and Most Haunted Live, which are both on the Travel Channel. And I've honestly never heard of Most Haunted Live. I don't think it's a show anymore, but I could be wrong. And it was also featured on Ghost Hunters on Sci-Fi and Fear on MTV, which I've never heard of that one. And actually, even though Al Capone lived very lavishly in his cell, he was always complaining that he was being haunted by the ghost of James Clark, who was actually one of the victims in the St. Valentine's Day massacre in Chicago. The massacre was a result of gang rivalry, and Capone actually led one side of it. It's not odd that this place could be haunted. Now, there were tons of suicides, disease, murder, torture, and people were going crazy. Now, they were completely isolated. If you've seen or heard anything about Eastern State, you know that they lived alone in a tiny cell, completely blocked off. They were not allowed to talk to or have any social interactions with anybody, or they could have very serious consequences. So a lot of people actually went crazy, like literally crazy. They went mad. So it's not hard to imagine this place being haunted with spirits of troubled people. And actually, I did see a little bit, like a tiny bit, about the different cell blocks that have a little bit of activity. So cell block 12 is known for hearing voices and cackling, and I'm sure you can hear that everywhere, but cell block 12 is known specifically for that. In cell block 6, you can see shadowy figures darting along the wall. In cell block 4, it is known that you could actually see the faces of the spirits that supposedly haunt the facility. Multiple people have actually reported seeing the silhouette of a guard in one of the towers at Eastern State. So earlier I was mentioning the story of an old guard that used to work there. His name is Gary Johnson. He claims that in the early 90s, he had just opened an old lock in cell block 4. He was trying to fix it. He says that a force gripped him so tightly that he was unable to move. And he described a negative, horrible energy that just exploded out of hell. And he also said that tormented faces appeared on the cell walls, and that one form in particular beckoned to him. Now, they weren't very specific as to what that was, but basically there was one face that appeared that he seemed to be drawn in by, I guess. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but that's honestly the only real encounter I've seen anywhere online, aside from the TV shows. However, on the other side of things, there's actually a tour guide. His name is Ben Bookman, and he says, and I quote, "It's a lot harder to find a believer than it is to find a skeptic here. We at Eastern State do not claim that the prison is haunted. we run a haunted attraction. So they are not allowed to actually come out and say, yes, this place is haunted. During tours, I've heard they are allowed to tell personal stories that they've had, but they are not allowed to officially claim that it is haunted. They are only allowed to tell their own personal stories. And they also, I don't know if it's all the time, but during the Halloween season, they have a haunted attraction, and it's basically kind of like a Fright Night horror kind of thing where you go, where you're in a certain part of the facility and it's just like a haunted, not really maze, but you get the point. I actually have a video of it linked in the description. Can't really see much of it, but it's kind of just a little taste of what it is. He also says that the staff doesn't like to exploit the darker image. He states again, most people making TV shows come in looking for ghosts. That's not the story we tell. Inmates were real people. These were people's lives. 70,000 people spent time here. We're not going to glorify it, and we're not going to make fun of it. So obviously the ghosts that may haunt the facility, they were actually real people at one time with real lives, and they were serving a sentence at this facility, and they don't want to kind of glorify it. They want to just keep it history and not really make it a ghostly haunted thing, if that makes sense. So people can actually take a tour of the facility online, as well as actually going to visit the site. They have multiple exhibits as well as art installations. You can also take a daytime tour of the prison on your own or in groups. Not only can you rent spaces there to have parties and corporate events, you can actually have your wedding there. However, they do not allow you to have the reception at the facility. You'll have to go elsewhere, and all of that information can be found on their website. I'm going to have that link below, obviously. And for the investigators, they actually offer private paranormal investigations during the hours of 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. on select evenings during the months of April through August. During the regular tour, as well as the overnight investigator tour, a staff member will guide the groups through the building, giving a history about the facility and actually answering any questions that you may have. And the private paranormal investigations are for groups of between 5 to 15 people, and it's $100 per person, and the groups will actually receive a complimentary general admission daytime pass for their daytime tours. So that's actually really cool. And so that's kind of all I have. Just like Crybaby Bridge, I do have a Google Docs form that I'm going to link in the description if you guys have any other information about Eastern State Penitentiary. I do have a section for ghost stories. If you have been there and you have had experiences, please leave your stories below in that section. Like, I'm really curious because I haven't been able to find anything. All of the links to the websites where I found the information on, as well as the Eastern State Penitentiary website itself, will be linked in the description. I also have links to clips from the Travel Channel website, a couple of which were from Ghost Adventures, and then another one was the clip of the haunted attraction that they have. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm sorry it wasn't as spooky as it was meant to be. I literally could not find like any stories at all of people who have had experiences, and that just really makes me mad because they claim it's one of the most, if not the most haunted place in the United States, yet there are no stories anywhere. So anyway, if you did enjoy this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like what you see and you want to see more. Also, click that bell so you're notified when I upload next. All of my social media will also be down in the description, so make sure you go follow me on that. And with that being said, I will see you guys on Friday. Bye!